Lucy, would you like to come say hello? Come here, please. Like I said, I think blah, blah, blah. Supernatural. I just really enjoy. Stop saying I really enjoyed it. And I don't really like that intro. How does my microphone work? Does it work okay? Hello and welcome to another video. My name is Heather and as always I'm reading with a vengeance and I hope you are as well. If you're new here, very warm welcome to you. If you're a returning viewer, thank you so much for coming back. I hope everybody is doing very well. I am here to talk to you about some more books that I've read recently. I don't really have much of a life update. I've painted. I went from a dark blue to a light blue. Wow. Life update, I painted. Jesus. I saw the new Superman movie. It was okay. It was well done, I think. I'm not a huge Superman fan. My husband is. It was fun. I love going to the movies. I love the whole going to the movie theater experience. I had an angiogram recently. I don't know if I've shared this with you. I started having tinnitus in the early part of December of last year. And if you don't know what that is, it's a ringing, they say ringing in your ears. It's more just in my head. It sounds like just loud buzzing in my head all of the time. It's worse at night and in the mornings, but it's always there. And it came on really severely, really abruptly. And so my doctor decided to go at it aggressively, and I had a couple of MRIs, and there's some things that popped up on the MRI that didn't really explain the tinnitus, but she said, I think you should go see a neurologist. No, not a neurologist, a neurosurgeon. Neurosurgeon said, I'd like to do an angiogram, see what's going on in there. It was interesting, a little test. I don't know if you're familiar with an angiogram. They either go in through the brachial artery if they're looking at your heart, or the femoral artery if they're looking at your brain. They were looking at my brain, so they had to go and inject dye through my femoral artery while he looked at basically all of my blood vessels inside my brain, which was really interesting. And everything came back fine. There's no explanation for the tinnitus, at least my brain and my blood vessels in my brain are healthy. So that's good news. Tinnitus, ever since I had it, of course, I've Googled the crap out of it, and millions of people suffer from tinnitus, but nobody really talks about it. There's no cure. You just kind of learn to live with it. But bottom line is I'm healthy and I'm super fortunate and grateful to be healthy. But that was an interesting experience. I got to experience fentanyl, and I can see why that is so addictive. Good God. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope everybody out there is having a good summer. How's everybody's reading going? I've been reading some good stuff, and I'm going to tell you about a few of them right now. So, of course, I always like to start with my DNFs, and I have two of them for you today. Evidently, Richard Powers is not for me, sadly. I've been looking forward to reading his books for a while now, specifically the Overstory, because it has to do with nature and the interrelationships between nature and humans and the future of nature and our environment and that kind of thing. And I thought it would really be up my street. So that's been on my radar for a while. But then when he came out with Playground last year, I think it was last year, I was really extra inspired to read his stuff. I DNF'd both of them. Let's just get straight to the chase there. I started with the Overstory, and it just didn't hook me. I started to listen to the audiobook, and I only got 10%. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, but it's 23 hours long. So 10%, I gave it a good shot. I did enjoy the first chapter, but then it got to the second chapter, and you are starting off with a whole new group of characters. So I didn't have the patience to read it for as long as you need to read it, because evidently eventually all the characters and all the storylines come together and interlink and connect somehow. I just didn't have the patience for it. It's too long. Yeah, it read like a collection of short stories, and with like nature as a common thread throughout. And it just wasn't cohesive enough early enough for me to stay engaged. So that wasn't for me. Then I tried reading The Playground, which I had a physical copy of. And The Playground basically centers around, I think, 5 different sets of characters, and they are all brought together to try to colonize a section of the ocean. I didn't get far enough. I just was bored. I just didn't feel connected enough to the characters like I feel like I should have been. And again, he addresses nature and the environment in this story as kind of a common thread between the characters and what they're trying to do. And I really thought that that would be something that would grab my attention, and it just didn't. There just wasn't anything that led me to invest in the story or the characters. So both of those Richard Powers books were DNFs for me. The next book I finished, which I read over a period of several months, is Knitting Yarns, Writers on Knitting. This was edited by Anne Hood. This is a collection of essays by different well-known authors and their experience with knitting. And of course, I'm a huge knitter. This is my latest sweater that I absolutely love. Yeah, I thought, what is a perfect collection of short stories for me, especially since short stories usually don't work for me unless they're written by Stephen King. But yeah, a bunch of writers. Elizabeth Berg has one in here. Sue Grafton, Anne Hood herself has one. Barbara Kingsolver, Ann Patchett, Elizabeth Searle, Anita Shreve, and Jane Smiley, among others who share just experiences with knitting and how it has helped them through grief, how it has helped them through a myriad of hard times, how it has helped them connect to, say, their daughters or another family member, and just what knitting has done to significantly change, enhance their lives. And I really, really enjoyed these stories. Another thing I enjoyed about this book is there are 6 patterns included in this book, from coffee cozies to a sweater, mittens. I just thought that was a really neat addition to this set of essays. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. So the next thing I read, I have a very, very unpopular opinion about, and it's even unpopular within myself because it is a book by one of my favorite authors. I read My Friends by Fredrik Backman. You guys, I did not really enjoy this one. I listened to this one. It was narrated by the actress Marin Ireland, I think is her name, and she did a fantastic job. I'm not sure I would have noticed the one thing that really grated on me as much if I read the physical book. But since I was listening to it, I heard it constantly. And there is a lot of this. Okay, let me back up. So what is My Friends about? So My Friends follows 2 timelines. In the present day, you're following Louisa, and she is basically a graffiti artist, and she wants to be a real artist. And she has a postcard of a famous painting, and she goes to the art gallery where this painting is displayed, and things happen that leads her to want to find out more about the artist and about the young kids that are inside the painting. And she ends up meeting one of those kids who's now an adult, and they together go on a train trip for reasons. 25 years earlier, you learn about the artist of that painting and 3 of his childhood friends who all bonded and spent a summer together on this abandoned pier in this seaside town. And you learn about their friendships and their families. Some of them had good families, others did not. And how their friendships and their sharing their dreams and ambitions and how it shaped them as they got older. So the themes of this story is friendship, loss and grief, the impact of art, the interconnectedness of lives across time, and of course the thing that I think that Fredrik Backman does superbly, and that is the complexities of human relationships and the search for meaning and connection, which I think he does a good job here. Here's the thing, and I don't know if this was something that happened through translation or if it was written this way, but this book has a ton of, is it similes? I think it's similes. I always get similes and metaphors mixed up, but I have some examples. So just in describing whatever, it seemed that every other paragraph had used a simile or metaphor to describe something. And there's so many ways to describe something or someone without having to use either one of those things. Eyebrows so high they could be bangs. Clears his throat for so long that he has a whole new voice at the end of it. So close together that only dreams can fit between their bodies. So ashamed he's out of breath. Blows his nose so hard that he feels like his brain is trying to smuggle itself out of him. Skin as soft as room temperature cheese. As confidently as if she had time to take an engineering exam. Those 7 examples were within 2 chapters, I think. It was very close together. And that was after hearing 15, 16, maybe up to 20 of them already when I first started reading the book. And if I continued to write down examples, I would have lost focus on the book, but there were a lot of them. I mean, tons and tons of them. I would love to get a word count of how many times the words so and that were used. So that was that rubbed me the wrong way every time he described something, which was a lot. I thought it was a good story. I thought the characters were okay. They read a little bit too, is twee the word? Just, I don't know. Kids don't talk like that to each other. It was very like Gilmore Girls. I loved Gilmore Girls. Don't come at me, okay? But nobody talks like that in the real world. And that's what these characters were like as childhood friends. Louisa, I found annoying. I think she was supposed to be late teen. No, she had just turned 18, so she was an adult. She read like a 13-year-old. She was just very immature and in the most annoying way. So unfortunately, this did not work for me. If you can see past all of those things that I mentioned, the story itself, I thought was good. It was very true to Frederick Bachman form in that he really gets into human relationships and how complex they are and how our differences can work better in a relationship rather than against them. So, I'm not going to not recommend this. I'm just letting you know this was not my favorite Frederick Bachman. This next one I'm super excited to talk to you about. You might have already seen me talk about it on my most recent video of my top 5 of the second quarter of 2025, and that is Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll. I knew when it came out and everybody was talking about it that it was going to be good, but it was so good. This one follows two women. We have Pamela, who is a survivor of the Florida State sorority murder. And then we have Tina, I think, in Seattle, whose friend Ruth went missing in broad daylight on a crowded beach, and she is looking for them. Pamela and Tina's lives intersect, and they become convinced that the murder at the university and Ruth's disappearance are connected and have to do with the same person. Now, murder at Florida State University. If that sounds familiar to you as something that actually happened, I think in the late 70s, if you're familiar with serial killers, then you know that that is a crime that was committed by the infamous Ted Bundy. While this is a fiction novel, we are dealing with people and events that are based on actual people and events. The brilliance of this, and you've probably already heard this before, the brilliance of this book is you know exactly who they're talking about. And it's not just talking about the crimes of Ted Bundy, but it's talking about how he was pursued, how he was portrayed in the media, how he was treated in the courts by judges and other court officers. As you're reading all of this in this novel, I mean, you know exactly who they're talking about. They're talking about this charming guy and how intelligent he was, how handsome he was. And I mean, you know it's Ted Bundy, but he is never once mentioned by name in this novel. And I love that so much about this novel. I love that that was intentional and that the stories of the victims are told here. And also, when he is talked about in this story specifically, he is not portrayed as the handsome, intelligent, bright, calculating mastermind that he was in the news stories of the past. And even up until the recent, with all the documentaries and movies that have been made about him, he's portrayed as this, and he just wasn't. He just wasn't as intelligent as documentary makers and movie makers and reporters and other journalists have made him out to be. He might have been charming, but I mean, I can be charmed by a squirrel sometimes, you know, it doesn't really mean anything. So I love what Jessica Knoll did with this story. That all aside, I was completely engaged in Pamela as a character, as a woman, her experience, what she went through and how she went forward after it. I was completely engaged in Tina's story and where she was coming from and why she was pursuing what happened to her friend. But truly at its core, this really focuses on the bonds that women have and their shared experiences of loss and grief and trauma and the search for justice. That really, really got me where it hurts. And I just think that that is the strength of this novel. Certainly it's important to highlight the true nature of Ted Bundy and really how he wasn't as intelligent as he was made out to be. And it was really about how incompetent law enforcement and the court system was when it came to him. I predict this will be seen again at the end of the year on a certain particular list of favorites. Highly recommend if you haven't read it already. Another one I mentioned on my top 5 of the second quarter of the year is The Library Book by Susan Orlean. This is nonfiction, and I was riveted from page 1. I mean, it read like a novel, but it was all true. It centers around the 1986 burning of the Los Angeles Public Library. It was an arson. They never caught who did it. They had a suspect. It burned at like 2,000 degrees for 7 solid hours. More than 450,000 books were destroyed. And books and other media, 750,000 books and other media were damaged and had to be repaired. It was catastrophic. And it was that event that inspired Susan Orlean to research not only that event, but the history of libraries, the history of librarians, the evolution of both. The research that went into this book is stunning. If you have any interest in libraries, you will enjoy this book. If you don't have any interest in libraries, what are you doing here? Please support your libraries. Please, please, please. If you don't have a library card, please go get one and support your libraries. Anyways, this book was just so fascinating. It gets into the guy who they suspected in this arson, his backstory and why law enforcement weren't able to close this case. Lots of good stuff in this book. If you enjoy a good nonfiction, if you like books about books, if you don't really do well with nonfiction, but you'd like to add more to your TBR, this would be a good one. It doesn't read like textbooky as some nonfictions do. It was fascinating. Take it from me. I loved it. The next book I read was When the Wolf Comes Home by Nat Cassidy. This was my first Nat Cassidy, and so this is a horror / fantasy novel, and you're following Jess. This is contemporary timeline. You're following Jess. She is a waitress if memory serves, I think she's an aspiring actress. She comes home late one night and she finds a little boy cowering in the bushes outside of her apartment. I think he's around 5 years old. She takes him in and, of course, immediately wants to find out who his parents are. Is he lost? Call the police, whatever. But things, of course, happen. And she realizes that the little boy is running from his father, his abusive father. And so through a certain chain of events, Jess finds herself on the run with this little boy. They experience a myriad of surreal and horrifying incidents and events as they are trying to evade the little boy's father. And then during this little terror road trip, Jess discovers that both the little boy and his dad have supernatural abilities, dangerous ones. To be more specific, the little boy, whatever he fears, manifests itself in real life. I enjoyed the story to a certain point. As it read like a horror for most of the book, I was enjoying it. I was riveted. I listened to it, and it was very well narrated. And I was completely engaged, enjoying it. Unfortunately, it got a little, I think it was, so the horror part of it, I really enjoyed. The fantasy part of it, no, I don't want to put this evil on fantasy. It wasn't the fantasy part of it. It just, towards the end, it got a little silly. It got a little, I don't mind camp, but this went beyond camp, or maybe it was campy and the campiness didn't have a place in this story. It just got silly and cartoonish. I have heard people kind of describe this as kind of told in a dark fairy tale type of way. For the love of all that is holy, I'm sorry if it's shifted again. I'm having technical difficulties up the wazoo today. My battery ran out. Anyways, where was I? Okay. I think I ended with it was a little bit too fairy tale-ish at the end, and my, I guess, aversion with fantasy, it just didn't work for me. The end just didn't work for me. But if you like everything I just described, if you like a good horror, if you like fantasy, you might like this one. I had a good time. It just wasn't my favorite ending to a story, but I had a good time with it as I was reading it. All right, I'm going to end on a good note. The last book I'm going to talk to you about also featured on my top 5 of the second quarter of 2025, and that is Penance by Eliza Clark. I think that Eliza Clark is a Marmite author, and definitely Penance is a Marmite book. Some people love it, some people not so much. I loved it. This is one of those books where you're reading and you thought you picked up a novel, but you find yourself looking online for names and places and events thinking that they're real. This reads like a true crime podcast or documentary. I had a really good time with this book. Now, that's not to say that there aren't dark themes in this book. There is a brutal murder that happens, and really that is the center of everything that's going on with this book. The incident that I'm talking about is the brutal murder of a 16-year-old girl at the hands of her teenage girlfriends, 3 of her girlfriends. But if you're looking for a cat and mouse whodunit type of mystery, that's not what this is. You find out early on exactly what happened and at the hands of whom. What this is a deep dive into the why of it all, kind of. And you're following it from the perspective of a journalist who has researched and investigated this crime and written a book about it. And the structure of the book is through interviews and news articles, stuff like that. And you're getting the perspective of each girl, including the victim, their histories, their relationship to each other, their description of the events of the night of the murder and the days leading up to it and the events leading up to it. And you're learning about their relationship with each other and their friends at school. And in the book, the murder happens on the eve of Brexit. And so it's 10 years later where all the details are coming out. And after this book has been written, and then people are starting to question the journalists' research and how much of it is factual. It's just a really good look at internet culture, relationships between teenagers, specifically teenage girls, social media, its effects on individuals and their families and their friends, our obsession with true crime, and I am guilty of that. I'll be the first to admit. I like watching true crime documentaries from like a human behavior and human nature stance. And that's what I enjoyed so much about this book. But I really liked what Eliza Clark does as far as put a spotlight on the morality of true crime and our obsession with it, and sometimes how it is packaged up for public's consumption, how it kind of make celebrities out of the wrong people. There have been some people who have not enjoyed how involved this book gets into the details and the histories. And there was a portion of the book where I thought it went a little too far. There's a young girl who was falsely accused of the murder, and it gets into her history a little bit too much. I mean, so far as to really get into her mentally ill uncle, just a little too much and too long. So there was that, but that was a small thing. The rest of it, as far as how deep it goes into each of the main characters' histories and the history of the town, I thought all of that added to the story rather than detracted from it. You know, I just think it says a lot when, I mean, I'm speaking for myself, when you're reading a novel and you are looking up on the internet of whether or not these people and places and events were real. I mean, that says a lot about the story and the writing. So I really enjoyed that. Are there any books that you guys know of that you did that for? I would love to get my hands on more books like that. Let me know down in the comments. I will give a warning though. The actual murder, what happens to this young girl, I mean, it is brutally described in this book, but I believe it wasn't gratuitous. I feel like you really had to describe how gruesome and violent these girls were. It made you want to know more about their history and how they were brought up and what their mindset was. So I think it was all connected. It's extremely descriptive and violent, but I thought it was necessary. This is a book I would definitely recommend. So that is it. Those are all the books that I have read recently-ish. Have you read any of these books? I would love to hear what you thought, or you can just say hi down in the doodly-doo. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.